Imagine taking a chimpanzee's brain and making it roughly 3 times larger, then somehow giving that animal the ability to build cities, launch spacecraft, write music, and wonder why its own brain became so large in the first place. That animal is us. Humans have an unusually large brain for our body size. And here's the strange part. A bigger brain isn't automatically better. Brains are incredibly expensive organs to maintain. They consume enormous amounts of energy, so evolution had to pay a serious price for our oversized brains. Which raises a fascinating question. Why did humans evolve such huge brains in the first place? Was it because we became smarter? Because we started eating more nutritious food? Because we lived in complicated social groups? Or was something completely different happening? The answer is probably a combination of several things, and the story begins long before humans ever existed. We weren't always big-brained. If you could travel back several million years, you wouldn't find humans walking around with giant heads. Our distant ancestors had brains that were much closer in size to those of other great apes. They were capable animals. They could move through forests, find food, avoid predators, use their environments, and survive. But they weren't building skyscrapers, they weren't writing books, and they certainly weren't debating evolutionary biology. Then something began to change. Across human evolution, brain size gradually increased. Not continuously, not in a perfectly straight line, but over millions of years, several human species evolved larger and more complex brains. One important example is Homo erectus. Compared with earlier hominins, Homo erectus had a substantially larger brain, and later humans went even further. Eventually, Homo sapiens evolved brains that are remarkable even among primates. But why? The most expensive organ. Here's something that makes the mystery even stranger. Your brain isn't very large compared with the rest of your body, but it consumes a huge amount of energy. Even when you're sitting still, thinking about absolutely nothing, your brain is working. Neurons are constantly sending signals. Cells are maintaining electrical gradients. Information is being processed, and all of this requires fuel. For humans, the brain accounts for roughly 1/5 of resting energy expenditure, despite representing only a small fraction of total body mass. That's an enormous investment. Imagine evolution saying, let's build an extremely expensive organ, and then making that organ even bigger. There must have been some serious benefits, because if a trait costs a lot of energy but provides little advantage, natural selection has little reason to preserve it. So our large brains must have helped our ancestors solve important problems. The question is, which problems? Maybe it wasn't just intelligence. The obvious answer is, humans evolved big brains because we became smarter, and there's some truth to that. But it's not quite that simple. Evolution doesn't directly select for something called intelligence. It selects traits that affect survival and reproduction. And intelligence is actually a collection of many abilities: memory, planning, learning, problem-solving, communication, prediction, social understanding, tool use, and the ability to adapt to changing environments. Our ancestors may have benefited from having better versions of many of these abilities at the same time. Think about surviving in a changing environment. If the weather changes, food becomes harder to find, a predator appears, or a new group enters your territory, being able to learn and adapt can be extremely useful. A larger, more complex brain could potentially provide advantages in exactly these situations. But there's another theory that gets even more interesting: the social brain. Humans are ridiculously social animals. We don't simply interact with one or two individuals. We form families, friendships, coalitions, communities, groups, and entire societies. But living in a social group creates a problem. You have to remember who people are, who helped you, who betrayed you, who can be trusted, who is related to whom, who is angry, who is cooperating, and who might cooperate with someone else. That's a lot of information. Some researchers have proposed that the challenges of living in increasingly complex social groups help drive the evolution of larger brains. This idea is sometimes called the social brain hypothesis. The basic concept is simple. As social relationships become more complicated, the brain may need more processing power to keep track of them. And humans take this to an extreme, because we don't just understand individual people. We understand invisible social concepts, rules, reputation, promises, status, traditions, shared beliefs, even completely imaginary characters and situations. Our brains are constantly modeling what other people might be thinking, and that ability is incredibly powerful. But social intelligence isn't the only piece of the puzzle. The food problem. A bigger brain needs fuel, and this creates another evolutionary puzzle. Where did our ancestors get all that extra energy? One possible answer is food quality. Compared with many other primates, humans rely heavily on foods that can provide a lot of energy relatively efficiently. And cooking may have been particularly important. Cooking changes food. It can make some foods easier to chew and digest. It can also increase the amount of energy our bodies can extract from certain foods, and this may have helped create an important evolutionary trade-off. Our ancestors didn't have unlimited energy, so evolution has to distribute energy among different organs and tissues. If the brain becomes more expensive, something else has to change. This idea connects to what's sometimes called the expensive tissue hypothesis. The basic concept is that energy is limited. A larger brain could be supported by changes elsewhere in the body, including changes in the digestive system and diet. But there's an important warning here. Cooking and diet are often discussed as explanations for human brain expansion. But exactly when different dietary changes occurred is still debated. The evidence isn't as simple as humans discovered fire and immediately grew giant brains. Evolution doesn't work that quickly. Tools changed everything. Now imagine you're an early human. You don't have claws. You don't have massive canine teeth. You're not the fastest animal on the planet, and you're not particularly strong compared with many large mammals. So how do you compete? One answer is technology. Even very simple tools can dramatically change what an animal can do. A sharp stone can cut. A hammerstone can break. A pointed object can pierce. And once an animal starts making tools, there's a new problem. You need to remember how to make them. You need to learn the correct sequence. You need to understand which materials work. And eventually, you need to teach someone else. This creates a feedback loop. Better brains can produce better tools. Better tools can create new opportunities. Those opportunities can favor individuals capable of learning and using them. And then the cycle continues. This is one reason human evolution isn't just about biology. It's also about culture. The culture machine. Here's where human evolution becomes truly unusual. Most animals learn, but humans don't simply learn individually. We learn from one another. A child doesn't have to reinvent everything from scratch. They inherit information from previous generations. How to find food, how to make tools, how to communicate, where to travel, which plants are useful, which dangers to avoid. And over time, that knowledge accumulates. One generation adds something. The next generation modifies it. Then another generation improves it again. This is called cumulative culture. And it may be one of the most important differences between humans and other animals. Because once information starts accumulating, the value of being able to learn, remember, imitate, communicate, and innovate becomes enormous. Your brain isn't just solving today's problem. It's inheriting solutions to problems that previous generations already solved. That's incredibly powerful. But there's a catch. So far, the story sounds straightforward. Big brain, more intelligence, better tools, better survival. Problem solved. Except, there's a huge catch. Big brains are dangerous. Not dangerous because they're intelligent. Dangerous because they're expensive. They require energy. They develop slowly. And human babies are born relatively helpless. A human child takes years to become independent. That's a massive investment. So evolution didn't simply give us a giant brain for free. It created an entire life history strategy around it. Long childhood, heavy parental investment, social learning, cooperation, teaching, and extremely long periods of development. In other words, the human brain didn't evolve alone. It evolved as part of a much larger system. Why did our brain get so large? So now we can return to the original question. Why did humans evolve such huge brains? The frustrating answer is, there probably wasn't one single reason. Instead, several pressures may have interacted. Changing environments may have rewarded flexibility. Complex social relationships may have rewarded better memory and prediction. Tools may have rewarded planning and learning. Higher quality diets may have provided more energy. Cooking may have changed how efficiently our ancestors could access that energy. And culture may have created an entirely new environment, one where learning became extraordinarily valuable. These factors don't necessarily compete. They can reinforce one another. Better brains can support better culture. Better culture can create new challenges. New challenges can reward additional cognitive abilities. And those abilities can support even more complex culture. It's a feedback loop. Biology changes culture. Culture changes the environment. And the environment changes the pressures acting on biology. The biggest mystery. But there's still something scientists don't completely understand. We know that human brain size increased dramatically over evolutionary time. We know that different human species had different brain sizes. We know that brain organization matters, not just total volume. And we know that modern humans have remarkable cognitive abilities. But we can't simply look at a fossil skull and read the thoughts of the person who once lived inside it. A larger brain doesn't automatically tell us exactly what that brain could do. That's one of the biggest challenges in studying ancient human intelligence. Scientists have to combine evidence from fossils, archaeological sites, tools, animal remains, diet, environment, and genetics. Then they have to build the most plausible explanation. And sometimes, different pieces of evidence point in different directions. That's normal. Science isn't a story where every mystery has already been solved. Final. So, why did humans get such huge brains? Maybe because the world became more unpredictable. Maybe because social life became more complicated. Maybe because tools and technology rewarded better planning. Maybe because our ancestors found new ways to obtain energy from food. Maybe because culture created a powerful feedback loop. Or maybe the real answer is some combination of all of them. And perhaps that's the strangest thing about the human brain. It didn't evolve simply to make us smart. It evolved in a world where survival increasingly depended on learning, adapting, cooperating, remembering, predicting, and teaching. Eventually, those abilities became so powerful that one primate began asking questions about its own evolution.